in druk. En ons sal dan hierdie recording of die opname beskikbaar stel op die webwerf en ons sal dit ook versprei aan alle geregistreerde belanghebbende en geïnteresseerde persone. So I'm going to do these introductions in English, Afrikaans. We will get to the language just a bit later, ons sal nou by die taalkwessie kom. Ek is nie vanaand hier om te vra dat julle die projek, die voorgestelde projek, ondersteun nie. Ek is ook nie vanaand hier om te vra dat die wat getand is teen die projek, dit om julle stil te maak nie. My rol is hier om seker te maak dat almal 'n regverdige kans het om hulle kwessies te opper, om seker te maak dat die issues, die kwessies akkuraat neergeskryf of opgeneem word en om seker te maak dat die proses sy integriteit behou en regverdig verloop. Goed. So, do I need to repeat that in English? I think I'm not here to ask you to support the project. I'm also not asking you to stop opposing the project if you are opposed to the project. My job is to listen and make sure everything is explained clearly, that you have an opportunity to raise your issues, your concerns, your questions, and to make sure that it is accurately reflected in our proceedings. So I hope that is clear. We recognize, ons erken dat hierdie projek vir baie mense, dit is 'n projek wat baie belangstelling lok. It's a project that is of interest, high interest to many people, and also for some high emotion. That is understandable, ons verstaan dit. Mense het kommer in die verlede uitgespreek en is bekommerd oor veiligheid, omgewingssensitiwiteite, vertroue, erfenis, heritage, die vissers se livelihoods, fishers livelihoods, plaaslike dienste, en aan die einde van die dag of die proses regtig werklik waar openlik en deursigtig is, if this process is really open and transparent. En ons wil dit graag erken vanaand en hierdie is die plek waar hierdie issues geopper kan word. So, ons is daar om te luister. Daar's net 'n paar sake wat ek graag wil uitlaat voordat ons die vergadering begin. A few points of reference maybe before we start this meeting. This meeting is part of the environmental impact assessment process for the proposed nuclear plant that is being considered at two sites, Bantamslip and Tuispunt. Bantamslip here in the Western Cape, Tuispunt in the Eastern Cape. En dit is 'n geleentheid, it's not a meeting that decides whether the proposed nuclear plant will be built. Dis nie die vergadering wat besluit. Hierdie is nie die vergadering wat besluit of die voorgestelde kernkragstasie gebou gaan word. Die vergadering is nie 'n referendum nie. It's not a referendum. Maar dit is ook nie betekenisloos en dit is nie net 'n tick-box oefening nie. Ons is regtig geïnteresseerd om te luister na die kwessies, want die vrae en die issues wat hier het, van die specialiststudies wat gedoen moet word inlig, dit kan bepaal hoe impakte geëvalueer word, how impacts are interpreted and evaluated, and at the end of the day, whether this process that's been followed was fair and defensible. En aan die einde van die dag, of hierdie proses wat gevolg is, regverdig was en ook deursigtig was. So in terme van taal, het u gesien dat ons die kopieë van die aanbieding buite beskikbaar gestel het. Dit is beskikbaar in Afrikaans, dit is beskikbaar in Engels en in isiXhosa. Ons het die hoofaanbieding vanaand voorberei in Engels. Ek wil net asseblief uitvind of dit in orde sal wees as ons in Engels aanbied, maar tydens die vraag en antwoord sessie of dat u welkom is om u vrae te vra in Afrikaans, ons in isiXhosa of in Engels. Ek wil net graag sien by show of hands of dit in orde is as ons dit vanaand so doen. Baie dankie, ek waardeer. As dit nodig is, kan ons ook die skyfies net kortlik saamvat in Afrikaans. As dit sal help, dan kan ons dit ook doen. Goed, ek dink, ek gaan nou oorbeweeg net na ons voorstellings toe van ons span. We'll introduce our team. From the applicant side, Eskom, we have Deirdre Herbst. Good evening, everybody. And we have Sadiqa Toffee. And Sadiqa will take us through the project description. Hy gaan ons die projek beskryf en deel hanteer van die aanbieding. From WSP, the Independent Environmental Assessment Practitioner, we have Ashley Strong, she's the project manager. And we have Steve Werov, who's here in the audience. You would have met our team outside, Melo, Matulwe, Natasha Bhaktavar, and Samira Ismail. So those are our team members from WSP. Our next slide, thank you Ashley. So just meeting conduct and guidelines. We request that one person speak at a time. When we have the discussion session, that you please raise your hand and work through me as the facilitator, so that and you're allowed to have strong feelings. That's okay, but please be respectful when you speak, so that everyone has an opportunity to hear, because we can't hear if everyone is upset. That's also important. And then, yeah. Comments, please try and keep the comments relevant to the project. Probeer asseblief om die vrae tydens die vrae en antwoord sessie relevant te hou tot die projek. Ons sal seker maak dat alle vrae wat gevra word opgeneem word en in die kommentaar en antwoord register opgeskryf word en dit word dan ook versprei aan almal. Kan ek net seker maak dat die ouens daar agter kan julle my hoor? Can you hear me? Okay. So please just give me a hands up if the audio is not clear at any stage during the presentations, because we have to actually make sure you can hear. Goed. Right. Ek dink dit is dit van my kant af. Maar nee, ek moet nog sê wat die agenda is. So ons gaan 'n bietjie verduidelik hoekom ons hier is vanaand, wat die doel van die vergadering is. Ashley gaan die aansoekproses gaan, die public participation proses wat gevolg word is, die alternatiewe van die projek. Ons gaan 'n projekbeskrywing hê, ons gaan kyk na watter spesiale studies, deel vorm van die omgewingsimpakstudie, wat die alternatiewe is wat ondersoek en geëvalueer word as deel van die omgewingsimpakbepaling. En dan ook wat die aanbeveling is van die in terme van hierdie studie. We'll also look at what the recommendations are based on the scoping phase that's been completed. Then we will have Q&A. So die deel, soos ek genoem het, as I've mentioned, this meeting is part of the EIA process. We are here to share at a high level information with you about the contents of the draft scoping report and to give you an opportunity to participate and raise your issues and questions. So thank you very much. Baie dankie. Ek gaan met dit oorhandig aan Ashley.
Good evening, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Okay, please just wave at me or something if you can't. Okay, so just give me a heads up. I will then try and project even more. Okay, so why are we here today? I think everyone's saying, well, we're here to talk about the nuclear power station. There's a little bit of background to that. So There has been plans for nuclear power stations at a number of sites around the country since the sites were chosen in the 1980s already. There was a nuclear site investigation program, and that was undertaken at that stage, which identified a number of sites. A couple of years ago, you would have been part of the Nuclear One EIA process that started, I think it was 2006, yeah. The EA was eventually awarded or issued in 2017, and it actually authorized the building of a nuclear facility at the Dana-Fontaine site. During that particular process, there was then subsequent appeals, and the appeals, after many different processes, was upheld last year in July of 2025. So from there, we're looking at the sort of history of the nuclear program and operation of the facility here at Kubu for about 40 years, which has been very successful. And here we find ourselves looking at the potential development of a second facility. So Dana-Fontaine was Nuclear One, and this is now a second facility. And we are looking at Taystone or Bantamsklip once again. And this idea is now, in terms of where the project falls, is backed up by a number of policies and plans that the government has put in place, starting off with the nuclear energy policy, backed up by the National Development Plan, and then again published in the Integrated Resource Plan, which was published last year in 2025. And that plan looks at the development of 5,200 megawatts over the course of a number of years, and then moving into a 10,000 megawatt program over a time frame. We are sitting in the green block at the moment, the environmental authorization process. Coupled to this process are some other permits and processes and application processes that need to happen. So we're looking at the environmental authorization process, which is the green block. We work parallel then with the heritage permit, which is required from the South African Heritage Resources Agency. That is something that is done parallel with the EIA process. Two processes that are undertaken post the EA, so they would only be done once authorization is achieved, an authorization is given, and that would be the water use license process and the coastal discharge permit. But the studies for that are already being included in the studies that our specialists will be undertaking. So should the project be approved by the DFFE, or the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, who's the competent authority, if it is approved, then Eskom would be able to move forward into getting those two licenses, and the studies that are being done now will inform those two processes. The pink box on the side is a completely separate issue from what we're busy with. And that is a process that Eskom runs with the National Nuclear Regulator, and that is called the Nuclear Installation Site License. And that is a concurrent process, happens parallel to what we're doing. It will have its own public participation process, and it is done completely outside of the EIA. Something that's changed since the original process that you were involved in is the legislative regime. So what has happened over time is in 2014, our EIA regulations were updated. They were subsequently amended again in 2017. And what they did in 2014, which was not in place during the original process, which started in 2006, was that the government instituted timeframes into the process, which were never there before. So now, both ourselves as EAPS, yourselves as the public, and the competent authority have very specific legislative timeframes that need to be looked at and kept to during the process as it progresses. So this has put timeframes on everybody. Some of it is quite short, but we have 44 days from submitting the application form and putting the draft scoping report out for review to submit a final report to the department. They then have 42 days to review and give us their decision as to whether they approve that plan of study for EIA and let us go into the next phase. And from that date of approval, we have 106 days to issue them a final EIA that they can then review and make a decision on. So they've really put themselves some short time frames, both the competent authority and ourselves. So we really have to work hard, and with your help, we'll be able to do that. The one thing that we are able to do, which I think everyone will be very happy about, is we do have some leeway for the second phase of the project to request the DFFE to approve additional time for the second phase. And we are currently working on that request so that we can then give additional time for people to review the draft EIA report. Okay, so we will have a slightly longer process, but not too long, but that is something that has definitely changed since the original process. We should then, based on these time frames, be putting out a draft EIA report in September. So that's when you will be able to see the next phase coming through. All right, in terms of public participation, I think a lot of you have been here, done that before, right? So we are trying to make sure that as where did you go? Tony said we run a fair and transparent process. We are looking at making sure that our engagement process considers language, culture, heritage, tourism, commercial issues. We're looking at Indigenous people too. We're making sure that we use a variety of different media options, newspapers, Facebook, site notices, pamphlets, virtual and in-person meetings, so that we give everybody the best opportunity. We've even got data-free websites, normal websites, WhatsApp, telephones, emails, to make sure that we reach as many people as we can. When we received the database from the previous study, we went through it and we had 6,000 people on the database as we received it, and so far it has grown to just over 10,000 people that we have registered, that are registered on the database and are receiving constant notifications. So the one thing we would like to request is, if you are not registered as an INAP yet, your signatures and your details at the door on the attendance register will be added, so you will become a registered INAP. Should you know anybody that still wishes to become an INAP, there's all sorts of information. There's QR codes that if you don't know how it works, find one of the youngsters on your way out, they'll show you how it works. And then there's registration forms and things on online forms that you can do. Or you can just send us an email with your details and we'll pop you on. Or, yeah. So there's lots of options for you to make sure that you register to get relevant information. We try to use modern platforms. We have a dedicated public participation team, which then helps us a lot, so we're not getting sort of distracted by other things. So every little comment goes into a comment and response report, and we do respond to every single one. Okay, so please be rest assured that all of that will be captured. So why are we doing the full EIA? Because we trigger a number of what we call listed activities that are outlined in the regulations of the National Environmental Management Act. We have listing notice 1, 2, and 3 activities, and we trigger a number of them in each of those different notices. And that means full EIA, full process, that's it, right? And I think that is an important thing for everybody to understand. The outline of each of those individual listed activities is detailed in Chapter 7 of the draft scoping report, which is available on the website and also the data-free website. So if you're on the data-free website and you're on your phone, doesn't cost you a cent, then we pick up the charges. So go and have a look at the detail if you need it. It's in Chapter 7. I'm going to hand over to Sadiqa now to go through a couple of slides just to give you a little bit more background in terms of the technology and the product description. Thanks, Sadiqa.
Thank you, Ashley. Good evening, everybody. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of the technical detail that we are dealing with in terms of what the nuclear power plant would be performing. As you can see, there are some key critical components and systems that would be used in the running of the plant, and that really consists of the nuclear reactor. Within the reactor is obviously the nuclear fuel, and in the fuel we are sustaining a chain reaction which generates neutrons to support the chain reaction and heat. The heat is used to warm the water in the primary circuit, and that is cooled off by what we call the steam generators. The steam generator has two functions that's very important. The first function is cooling the water that returns to the reactor and maintain the system under pressure. That's why it's a pressurized water reactor. The second function is to generate steam. The steam goes to what we call the secondary circuit, and that is used to drive a turbine. And the turbine drives a generator which produces electricity that is sent out to the grid that we all know. And then the steam is cooled off by water that we normally use from the sea, and that's the third leg that's out there, the part highlighted in green. And that is used to cool off and condense the water coming out of the turbine. It's three clear circuits that is separated from each other and independent of one another, and not in contact with the nuclear fuel per se. So the large components that's in there, you see the reactor vessel, the steam generators, the containment building that maintains that, and that constitutes the nuclear island. And then the next slide really is talking through the large components that you'll see being constructed as part of the plant. We have the nuclear island, which comprises the main concrete building that you'll see, known as the containment. Within the containment will be housed the reactor vessel, the steam generator, the pressurizers, the important safety systems to help in maintain that plant component there. Connected to that would be the secondary island, or the conventional plant, and that's where the turbine and the turbogen set would be housed in terms of the turbine oil. And that then connects to the high voltage yard where electricity transmission is then connected to the grid. You also see on the diagram is quite a lot of water tanks that will be constructed. We will be using desalination plant because South Africa is water source. The intent is to become self-sufficient in terms of the water use on the plant. Therefore, we will have a desalination plant and we will be storing water on site in various tanks and the like. We will be drawing water, as I mentioned, for cooling from the sea, so there will be an intake structure and an outflow structure to circulate the water, and there will also be a temporary spoil release spot to dispose of construction sand really during the construction phase. And then on site we will also have the temporary waste storage facilities to store waste on site before it gets disposed of at ball pits for the radioactive waste, or millimeter and intermediate waste, and then later on through to ball pits as well, the current designated repository for high level waste or spent fuel during that period. I think that covers everything. Next slide, please. What is important to note in terms of the shift before will be what we call the plant parameter envelope use. What we've done in terms of, we have not specified a specific reactor technology in the EIA, because we have not yet gone to the market to test for the specific reactors. And we've specified the plant parameter envelope. This really gives us an envelope of specific criteria that any potential reactor vendor can provide us to deploy on the site. The key item there is the vendor's reactor design needs to meet the requirements that's specified in the plant parameter envelope. And that's quite, it's not a unique approach, it's an internationally accepted approach that we're following. And it allows us the flexibility to be technology neutral and allow different companies to be able to tender for the reactor. And as long as they meet the specific requirements of the plant parameter envelope, we'll be able to select the appropriate technology that meets our requirements. So all our work has gone into really specifying on a broad level what the main criteria is that the vendor needs to comply with, and that will find its way into the final reactor design on there. And a lot of those works are already detailed in the chapter work that comes through in the EIA that needs to be looked at on that. Just from a safety perspective, on the next slide, I'm just giving some key safety features that we are looking at in terms of reactor design. The first one is we rely quite a lot on passive safety systems. And this is really systems where we allow nature to do its work in terms of the location and the use of natural forces of natural circulation or gravity-fed systems to perform critical functions. That work that's proven, that's out there. We're looking around making sure that there's appropriate redundancy in systems and components that is installed on the plant, and with redundancy provides us various levels of defense. And it feeds into our defense in depth strategy where we're relying on multiple systems to provide the same level of safety through different means and redundant means to perform that. The other items we're looking at is in terms of the lowest core damage frequency, and that's really a measure around the safety aspects of the specific plant design to lower down the core damage frequency in case of event. And we need that to be as low as possible. A lot of the designs from the probabilistic safety analysis point of view does have this measure in place, and we seek to drive that as low as possible to meet the current international norms and standards for Generation T+ design. That's there. We're also looking at the other item around making sure that we have a robust. Yeah, it needs to be robust against extreme events. And really we're looking here is making sure that the plant is designed for appropriate extreme weather conditions and design. So an extraordinary high tsunami, hurricane winds, and those other items. We're looking at making sure that there's resilience in the plant to meet those extreme environmental conditions that the plant needs to cater for on that. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now more into the EIA part of things. So every EIA is required to have a look at alternatives. There's a number of different types of alternatives that one can look at. The most important thing is that all of them are feasible, reasonable, and viable. All right, those are the key tick points that an alternative needs to meet. If it doesn't meet those tick points, then it needs to be excluded. So we've looked at a couple of different types of alternatives in the scoping report, and if you consider chapter 6 in the draft scoping report, there's a very detailed outline of the various alternatives that we have looked at to date. We have site or location alternatives, we have different energy type alternatives, we've got a lot of design alternatives, and we also make mention of the no-go alternative, which is the one alternative that will have to be taken into the EIA phase. The others, these are the ones that we've looked at in the scoping phase, and if you then go to chapter 11, which is our plan of study for EIA, we give the recommendation as to which alternatives we recommend go into the next phase. So I'm going to keep you in a little bit of suspense until the end of presentation so I can give you those results. Or should I say recommendations. But we have two siting alternatives, Bantam's Klip and Tailspit. We've got energy alternatives, coal, gas, renewable, and obviously nuclear. And we've got a number of different design alternatives looking at footprint alternatives, cooling alternatives, water intake and discharge alternatives, dredging alternatives, excavation and also swirl disposal alternatives, freshwater supply alternatives, and brown disposal alternatives. There's a lot of alternatives just based on the actual design of the facility that we have looked at and discussed. So do yourself a favor, go and have a look at those chapters. But we'll keep you in suspense until the end of the presentation for the recommendations. Bantam's Klip, I think you guys know this area very well, where the plant is sitting with Abalone Farms in south, moving through to where we are this evening in Pearly Beach, Conspire, and then Hermanus back towards Cape Town. So that is our one location. And then Tastepunt here is the other location, which is nestled between Oyster Bay, Cape St. Francis, and obviously Sea Vista is also in close proximity to the Tastepunt. So we've got a Western Cape site and an Eastern Cape site. For those who have walked a long way with the projects over the last few years, you'll know that the specialist studies are very important, and there are many. Okay, so we have a lot of specialist studies. I think we've got about 28 that we need to get done in the next phase. I think there's 24 included in the scoping phase, ranging from physical environment to biodiversity and ecology, to water resource and supply, social, economics, land use, heritage and sense of place, human health, safety and risk, waste, climate, and even long-term impacts, and even infrastructure and services. And there's many different ones in those different categories. Something else that's also a little bit new, which is very new actually, that wasn't around when Nuclear 1 was done, is the DFFE screening tool, which now is a compulsory thing that we need to include in our studies. The screening tool is an online tool that you put your sites in, and it spits out a tool based on all the online data that they have gathered from different places, and it pops out the sensitivity of each site, what it thinks the sensitivity of each site is. They then have to look, they then specify what specialist studies they want to see for the different projects. We have to do this on every project, not just this one, and it will tell you what specialist studies you have to have in your study. So we have in this list bolded the studies that the DFFE tool has requested us that we do need to do. And then the rest that are not bold are extra ones that we've added, which we think are also just as important. Okay. We also have a mix of specialists that have been involved in the project since the beginning, and they know the sites very well. They've got all the background information. They've studied them over the years. Those specialists are marked with a double star, and then we also have brought in some new eyes on some of the specialist studies to review the old and see what they can add to this process. So those are the specialist studies. The specialist studies, in terms of baseline description, is in Chapter 8 of the draft scoping report, and Chapter 10 outlines the potential impacts that have been, or should I say preliminary impacts that have been identified to date. These preliminary impacts will be then further looked at and further studied and confirmed in the next phase. Part of the screening tool requirement from the DFFE is to develop a sensitivity map for each site, which is what you see here. It is a very busy map, but it is in the report, and you'll find it in Chapter 8, or Chapter 9, I think, Chapter 8, Chapter 9. The description of the different areas is in Chapter 8, but the maps are in Chapter 9. The red areas on this particular one this is the Bantam Split map. The red areas are what we call critical biodiversity areas of number 1, which are the highest level of critical biodiversity area. The green area is going north is protected areas. And then you can see a little hatched section there is a fairly detailed hatch section which shows heritage sensitivities. We are very aware that those heritage sensitivities do flow north and south, but those are just the ones that were identified on the site by the specialists. And this is the sensitivity map for the Tastepunt area. You can see that there's still some CBA 1s there, but this is the Eastern Cape version of their biodiversity sector plan. We still have a lot of heritage there that also does go sort of east and west along the coast as well. But there's a nice description of this in Chapter 9 in one of the appendices of the report. Chapter 10 of the report outlines, as we say, the key issues, or the preliminary impacts that have been identified. The specialists have all gone in and looked at the impacts on both the Bantamsklip and the Tasman site, looking in all the different studies. They've identified various impacts from what is the significance before mitigation, looked at some potential mitigation measures already, and what is it like once the mitigation measures are in place, the predictions of how it would change after those mitigations are implemented. There's quite a number of them, but basically biodiversity, social, physical, environment, health and safety, and the long-term issues have all identified various impacts. And what will happen in the next phase is that these will be reviewed and updated with any new information that they've got since the additional studies that they may need to do. There will be detailed assessments of these impacts. They'll be assessed, and then the mitigation measures will be strengthened and changed as they gain more information through their processes. And this is also where your input is very important. So if you're looking through Chapter 10 and you don't agree with an impact, then please let us know so that we can forward it on to the specialists, and then they can have a look and take that into consideration. If you have knowledge, local knowledge of something that will help the specialists, please let us know. So through this process, the specialists were all requested to have a look at both sites. So they all had to have a look at Bantamsklip, and they all had to look at Tasman. And they had to go through the impacts at both sites. Are the impacts going to be the same? And in terms of their specific specialist area, they needed to tell us on which site they thought the facility would be best at this point in time. Okay, so where would that impact be lowest at this stage? And they all had to pick. So we have, this is a sort of a summary of what happened, but I can shorten it even further. So 4 of the studies picked Bantamsklip out and out. 2 of them said Bantamsklip is good, Tasman's okay, it can also work, but Bantamsklip is better. 8 of the studies said Tasman, end of story, and 11 of the studies were neutral. Either way, doesn't matter. Okay, so with that in mind, we need to now come up with the recommendation in terms of the alternative, which are the most feasible, reasonable, and viable at this point in time. And we went back into things like readiness in terms of the National Nuclear Regulator process. Where's Bantamsklip in terms of Tasman? How is that looking? Tasman won that round. It's definitely more ready than Bantamsklip is. We had to look at the transmission integration opportunities. How ready is Bantamsklip to be linked to the national grid to get the power out to the rest of the country? What's the Tasman situation look like? Is that better or worse? And Tasman also is better from that perspective. There's more opportunities to get the power out onto the grid at the Tasman site. So if you put all of those together, and the fact that more specialists identified Tasman as better at this point in time, we have recommended in our scoping report that Tasman is taken through for the next round for detailed studies in the EIA phase, and that Bantamsklip is left at this stage. We have not said that Bantamsklip is fatally flawed. We have not said that it should be taken out of consideration completely. It's just not ready yet. So it's still there's an option in future, but it's not really at the moment. So that is our recommendation in the scoping report. It is detailed and outlined in Chapter 11 of the report. And that is our recommendation. It's not the final decision. We now have to submit that to the department, the DFFE, and they make the decision as to what then goes through into the EIA phase. They will either confirm and agree with us and then say, we agree, take Tasman through to detailed studies, or they could come back to us and say, actually, no, we do want you to do detailed studies at both. So we then have to wait and see what they have to say. And then we do that in the next phase. Okay. But at this stage, we believe that Tasman is the better site at this point that needs to be studied in more detail. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to hand over back to Tony, and she can take us into. Maybe I can just show you here is the QR code for the online registration. On the walls outside, there's the QR code for the two different websites, the WSP website and the Data Free website. You're welcome to take a copy of those. There's also the email address, there's a contact number, there's also a WhatsApp number, also on one of the forms outside on the wall. So take a photo of that before you leave so that you've got all the contact details and so that you can send your comments through to us. And then I can hand back to Pearly. Thanks so much for your attention and patience.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley, and thanks for finishing so quick. It's even better than last night.
Yay!
So just a reminder before we carry on, we are busy with scoping phase, so this is not the last opportunity to comment. And just a reminder, one person at a time. I'm doing this for the benefit of those who came in a little bit later after I shared the rules for conducive discussion. Please raise your questions and your issues and your comments in a respectful manner. Dis okay om sterk te voel oor saak, maar ons vra natuurlijk asseblief respectvol sal opbel. Werk deur my asseblief en dan so ver as moontlik probeer dat die kommentaar relevant bly tot die projek. Dis hy. So ons gaan vrae neem, kom ek neem 3 op 'n slag. So eerste 3 hande gaan vir my op asseblief. Daar agter, ons het hierso. So ek gaan nou na julle toe kom. Dankie vir julle geduld by voorbaat. You're welcome to ask your questions in English, Afrikaans, or isiXhosa, and I forgot to actually introduce Tengu Duve. He is our isiXhosa interpreter.
Thank you for a fairly comprehensive talk. Your screen is larger. I just want to know what sort of time scales, let's all say, all very good, taste Fontaine that is at the moment, at the moment for the side regarding the EIA process. But let's say it is Bantam Slip. What is the time scale for boots on the ground and like first concrete setting and then closing off of that area? When would that happen? Because I have a business, a tourism business, that this will close it down, amongst other tourism businesses as well. There's no way tourists would like to come and look at a nuclear power station, despite the fame and fabulous Cuba. So I just want to know, worst case scenario, what is the close down date if this is the chosen site?
I think it's probably, Deirdre is good for that one. I can do, maybe do you want me to do EIA time first?
Yeah.
So let me just put EIA timeframes on first. So EIA timeframe would be, we would know by July what the DFFE say as to which site needs to go into for detailed review, or detailed study, should I say. We then need to have, so that would be the first thing, and we would let everybody know about what that decision was and when that approval comes through. The second then stage would be the draft EIA. That needs to go out September, October. And then we would need to submit a final EIA in January of next year, 2027. Then the project there has been an application launched with Infrastructure South Africa to put it into what's the word, apply it for SIP status, so that's a strategic infrastructure project. If that is approved, then the DFFE will have 57 days to review and make a decision on the actual EIA itself. So then that EIA decision would come through in around March, and then there would be the 20 days of that people would have to appeal should they wish. So that's the EIA time frame. And then in terms of Eskom's time frames, I'm going to hand it to Darren.
Thanks, Ashley. Okay, so Eskom is planning a phased process. There's 5,200 megawatts which we would like to construct and operate in our first phase. So that is over a couple of sites. We've already got approval at the Danafontein, which is the Kuburg site, and the thought is that that would be the first site that we would put a unit or two. And then we would like to go to a site that comes out of this process as the second site, and at this stage it's looking like it will be Tastepunt. And then we also want to look at putting some small modular reactors a little bit further down the line as they become commercial and licensable. And we would like to do that, to start construction on the first site in 2029, 2030, and to have the plant operating by 2039.
Can I just ask you to respond to the concern about the impact of tourism as well?
Yeah, thanks for the tourism question as well. So one of the extra studies that will be in the EIA phase is an impact assessment on tourism in the area. If they do approve Tastepunt to be the only one that we look at, then they will do it there, because the environmental split will be essentially off the table for now. But if they do say look at both, then they will have to look at both areas. So it will be very important for us to have your name so that they can chat to you at that stage. Okay, so there will be an in-depth study on the impact of tourism, of both positive and negative, particularly impacts on tourism going forward.
Thank you. Just state your names, please.
Jeremy Mann. I'm from Megallis Heritage and Conservation Society. I've got a couple of maybe comments and then a question or two.
Could you just speak up, please?
Yeah,
Project.
put that here. The first comment is the level of the detail is in the specialist reports. And we're expected to make comments on them in 30 days. The process as it is right now, I registered our society last week and myself last weekend. To date, I have not had any response whether the registration has been registered. But more importantly, I had no link to actually download the documentation. Okay? And it's important if you're going to get comments that are credible and viable, we need to be able to do that. And just your scoping report, I see 774 pages. You say there's 24 detailed reports. They're probably all 200-300 pages. But if you're expecting us to give you credible comment about our concerns and our agreement in terms of the impacts, you need to actually make the scope available. And you need to consider the time frame for us and mainly lay people to actually make those comments. So that's the first thing about the process. The second thing is we have a real concern is that as a heritage society, we do lots of impact assessments from a heritage point of view and even from a conservation point of view. I note from the presentation and from your summary, DSR, is that the impact assessment is limited to the site of the nuclear facility. The specialist studies look at heritage at a later stage. But we are unique in this area of South Africa in that we have a UNESCO heritage floral kingdom. Okay? And none of those other legislations actually look at the impact on that. This is a kingdom that is a distributed kingdom for the outstanding universal value each of these little kingdoms actually provide. They are not just reserves, but there are farms, corridors, and and coastal belts, which are buffer zones to those unique heritage or those unique floral kingdoms.
Yeah.
There is nothing here that is even considering the impact on that. Particularly the power lines, the distribution network, which will have to traverse those very areas, which will have impact in this fragmenting that heritage site. And it's a fatal flaw in terms of not being considered. And I believe that you need to actually consider that. And we need to put that in to our comments so that they are registered. This is a fatal flaw in terms of the Bantam Cliff site. We are part of a heritage, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And current legislation doesn't actually cover those impacts, but they need to be considered because it is a big tourist attraction, it's a big science attraction, and it's a unique thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question, maybe comment. Where does the competency of the project management of Eskom be assessed? Because with all due respect to current Eskom people, the project management competency record for standard coal-fired plants has been abysmal.
Yes.
We're talking about a nuclear site here that is going to have real impact. And how does that whole impact and permitting takes place? Because that is key to how the impacts are going to realize.
Thank you. So, if I understand correctly, the first question related to process and the lack of access to the links despite having registered as an INAP. I heard some murmurs in the room, so I just want to say thank you for that comment. It is noted. What happens if you sign the register tonight? If you sign the attendance register tonight, we will make 100% sure that that information is distributed as pronto, immediately, because it is critical for you to receive the information. I understand when people don't want to sign the register, but it's critical to please register as an interested and affected party. By signing that register, you are not supporting the project, you are not opposing the project. You are simply sharing your details with the understanding in terms of POPI that the E will communicate information about this specific project only to you, and that you will be kept abreast of progress and informed of future meetings. In terms of the heritage floral kingdoms, do you want to comment on that impact assessment that will be done?
So what I will definitely do with the floral kingdom, I will definitely let both our heritage and our biodiversity flora specialists know about that comment so they can comment on it and give a response. In terms of the registration, we do work through we get thousands of emails every day, we work through them as quickly as possible. I think tonight is very important, and we do have all the QR codes available and all the links available for you this evening. So please take a copy of the PID, take a photo of the QR codes out in the hallway there. They'll give you the website and the data-free website details that you can go in immediately and download. If you're on your phone and you're not on Wi-Fi, the data-free will pull down everything and download everything for absolutely free. You won't have to pay a cent. We pick up all those data charges. So please feel free to take photos of those QR codes, etc., and take the documents with you. So we do apologize, we do try and do it as quickly as possible, but we will get to you, I promise, and just get the documents outside. We also have documents, obviously, in the libraries, hard copies that you can go with. There is one in the library at Pearly Beach. We have a one here that Eskom has as well, and we have one where we have it on a tablet that people can have a look at tonight if they need to. But there are different ones around in Cape Town. We have one in our offices, for example. But nevertheless, there's a bunch of things around.
But with all due respect, you can only do a credible job of commenting on the...
If you've got enough time. I agree. I do agree. And we will definitely get you as quickly as possible. So we do that and have that there. And you've taken down that, and I will share that with the specialists.
Okay. Right, and then also the comment on the project management competency at Eskom. Is there any process? Would you like to comment on that? Noted. Thank you very much. We may not be able to address or respond to all the questions tonight, but we do undertake to note them down and to definitely get back to you in that respect. Thank you for your comment. There was another hand. I think there were three hands here and then 2 hands there. Thank you for your patience. I know you, I see you. Thank you.
Sadiqa will respond.
Sadiqa will respond. Thank you.
No, I can assure the team that when the current Eskom system is configured, we will use professional project managers. We have operated River nuclear power stations successfully for the last 40 years.
Just switch it up.
I'll speak slower as well.
And slower.
And slower, okay. So I just wanted to put it out there that we will use professional project managers in terms of managing the construction and really the project with experienced personnel. We have successfully and we are continuing to operate Kubu for the last 40 years. We've just completed the life extension of the plant for an additional 20 years. We have quite a lot of people with experience in the operating unit, and the project will be run from within the domain. It's not going to be run by the conventional plants and medical power plants. The culture is different, the experience is different, how we manage items from Kubu's perspective and the nuclear industry is different, and we will be drawing on all that operational experience to support us in managing the contract with the appropriate support around that. Thanks.
Can I just clarify my concern, please?
If you are very quick, because we have many questions.
Just to clarify, the concern is not the operation of the nuclear plant. There's a demonstrated record there. There's also a demonstrated record of the project of Maturi and Cecilia. And the fault was not it was in procurement, the appointment of contractors, and the project management of them. And so the engineering standards were substandard, silos crashed, things that should never happen. You cannot afford to have that on a nuclear site.
Just keep it close to your mouth.
I'm Winkler, homeowner. I've got 2 questions, one for WSP. Has WSP ever been involved in any environmental studies for Eskom before, and what was the outcome there? Did they actually take it into account? And then a question towards Eskom. It seems that there has been a decision to go nuclear even before any of the studies has been completed. It doesn't sound like any other options are being taken into consideration, and why is that?
Thank you for those points. WSP.
So we are a global consulting firm. We have done projects, yes, for Eskom before, on different types of projects. We've never been involved in a nuclear facility with them at all. We were not involved in the previous one. So we are fresh eyes, essentially, on the nuclear facility. We have done some renewable work for you, solar. We've done some power lines for distribution. We've done some bigger power line, 400 kV screening study in Cape Town for Eskom transmission, and we've done some smaller work for Eskom distribution over the years. So we've worked in all of the different, I suppose, operating units. We've also done many EIAs for independent power producers, doing large renewables, solar, wind, etc. So we've got a long track record of energy facilities behind our name, of which we are independent from all of those applicants. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. So nuclear is definitely not our only consideration. We get our direction from the policy, the Integrated Resource Plan, which is developed by government. And government looks at what is the energy mix going to be for South Africa, and they include in that how do we address climate change. Renewables forms a big part of making sure that we've got less coal and more low carbon options of generating electricity, and nuclear is also a low carbon option. So what we see coming out in this integrated resource plan, but also in previous integrated resource plans, is a large component of nuclear in the energy mix that's in the policy. So that's the starting point of why nuclear. And we're not just looking at nuclear, we've just got an approval last year for another pump storage scheme on an EIA. So the EIA is one component, and then all the other things need to follow. The different licensing processes, making sure you take the project forward, the funding for the project. We also need to get a NERSA license to actually start construction. And in the nuclear case, we have to get a nuclear licensing license as well. So we've done a pump storage scheme. We've just initiated an environmental impact assessment for gas in Richards Bay. And then we have lots of smaller projects for PVs at our power stations, which will be closing down. And one of the things that we need to take into account is that 8 gigawatts, that's 8,000 megawatts, which is a lot more than we're planning in this nuclear process, will shut down in 2030, coal plants. And that has been committed in the integrated resource plan as well. So you're losing a large portion of base load, and you're adding a lot of renewables, but you need a proper energy mix to be able to make sure you've got a secure supply of electricity. So yeah, so it's not just nuclear, we're focusing on many different technologies.
It's still 9 years to, difference there.
Sorry, I just realized I didn't answer the second part of the question about approvals. So in all of our energy projects, we've had projects approved, and we've also had projects rejected. So the DFFE makes the final decision.
Thank you. Sorry, I see your hands. I know you've got your hands up. I want to give everyone an opportunity. So may I appeal to your patience? Kan ek asseblief vra vir u geduld? Ons het 2 hande daar eers opgehaal na die eerste 3 mense. So ek gaan voor asseblief.
Yes, all right. My name is Gandhi Smith. I'm an engineer. I want to get back to your alternatives. One thing, all right, your report I see is very comprehensive, etc. Congratulations. But what I think you're missing is hydro. Okay, if you look at our area here, we've got lots of mountains, ranging from 500-600 meters down to about 200 meters. I want to take you to the Drakensberg pumping scheme. The previous lady also mentioned about the pumping scheme. Not necessarily pumping scheme, you can have a dam on the bottom and then a dam on the top of your mountain range. No environmental impact, because you've got a pipe into the land, it's called the Atlantic Ocean, and you pump it directly up to the mountain and you let it flow down. And you've got that scheme already, it's 1,000 megawatts, the Drakensberg scheme. If you take the mountain ranges here from Hermanus to down to here with what we've got, you at least can generate more than 20,000 megawatts just out of the hydro scheme. So have you looked at that? Or haven't you looked at that? That's the question. And what about it? If you're looking at something like that, that will cancel all the, you haven't got carbon into the air, with coal, etc. So it's a very clean energy and simple.
Thank you. So is hydro schemes being considered as part of the alternatives?
So we don't have large hydro resources in are on the Fourie and Van der Kloot dams, and they're small. They are around 300 megawatts. So from a water resource, we don't have large hydro that's run a river. There is large hydro in the Congo, and that has been looked at for quite some years, but the political instability in that country has not allowed Southern Africa to really exploit that hydro resource. So we are looking at pump storage, and when we did the studies for pump storage, we did the whole country, and we looked at where we could build hydro plants. Now, when you've got a pump storage scheme, remember you're saying upper dam, lower dam, and it is usually in a mountainous area and usually a protected area as well. So we then selected, I think, 7 sites, and we eventually selected the Gouda pump storage scheme, which is now completed and built, and the one in the Steelport area, which we just finished and got an environmental authorization for. And there was a 3rd site that looked feasible, but when we started doing the geotechnical information there, it became non-feasible. At this stage, that's what we're doing on hydro, and we don't expect to increase it that much more.
Yeah, but everything you said now is very hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, so what you're talking now about is where there's rivers, etc. I'm not talking that. I'm talking pumping seawater, okay, up to a mountain here in the mountain range. So I think you're missing just the point, sorry to say, that you haven't looked at it. So if you look at something like that, that's not necessarily a pumping scheme, but it's a scheme where you can put, they've got it started down now, the renewable energy with all the windmills, etc. So one of those windmills can pump constantly water up to the mountain, and you can let it flow down. Okay, you've got your various efficiencies and ratios, but you must do the calculations, etc. But that you can make it also function to pump the water, because the biggest story is just to get the water. And you've got it together as a river at Drakensberg with a pump it actually to the Gauteng or the Vaal Dam. So I think you must seriously look at it, because it's only an engineering issue with the salt water that's going to have an impact on the impellers, etc. You know? So it's not so much a big impact, and I think you must really look at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So sorry, I missed the intricacy of your question. We actually have done extra research studies on exactly that, and putting a pump storage scheme on the edge of the mountain in Morgan's Bay. So that's a very sensitive area, but that is one of the areas, for example, that you could do pump storage. So we did a research project, we looked at it, and I can maybe try and pull out what the outcomes of that was at the time that we did the research project, but it was found not to be a suitable option to take forward. We've also looked at doing it in the mine shaft. So having a pump storage scheme where you take water from the mine shaft that's already there and pumping it up to an upper dam. And we haven't been able to find a suitable mine shaft. And the reason is that it's very difficult to contain the water in one space in the mine itself, and then also the liabilities and everything that goes with that. So we have actually looked at that in detail in research studies, but those research studies have not been taken forward.
Thank you. Thank you for those good comments. I think there was another hand there, Zumi. Yeah, thank you, that gentleman.
The lady in the white with the stripes as well.
Good evening. My name is Pearly. I would like to just ask Eskom, what is the reason that the new plant cannot be built into the old plant at Kuba Nuclear Power Station? And has a principal contractor been appointed already? And if so, from what country? Because I don't think so we're capable of building something like that. Thank you.
That's where our first site is planned. at what I call the Danafontein site, right next to Kubu. That's where we plan to put our first new units, and then that would be followed by the next site, which would either be this site or the Tasman site.
Thank you. So I'm going to move to this gentleman here because his hand is up for.
Second question.
Second question.
But has a contractor been appointed?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, we're not going to put a contractor or a vendor. I did mention that in my slide, and when I spoke about the plant parameter envelope, that any vendor that would be looking at it to meet those requirements. The process we're following is technology neutral. We have not yet selected any vendor to supply us with the reactor at this moment in time. That commercial process will still follow through afterwards.
Mike Brooker, resident at Pearly Beach. I've got a question. This is mainly an environmental study, but the report does venture into the economics of nuclear power. And my question is, the example that was cited there is some obscure cost comparison from Ontario, which comes up with obviously the desired outcome of nuclear being substantially cheaper than solar or wind or anything else. Now, we've got all these things in South Africa, so we could have simply put in some South African comparative numbers, which tend to come out very much on the other side of that equation. Also, there was another study in 24, also from Ontario, publicly available, which also comes to a completely different conclusion, namely that new nuclear energy was substantially more expensive than was going to be coal or wind or even solar. This is in northern Canada, so solar is not the biggest option there anyway. Do you maybe know why they chose to go this particular route?
Are you clear on your question?
So the studies that we included as background, it's definitely not part of the impact assessment. It was background that we had available, that was made available to us from our global colleagues in Canada. We have a large section of WSP who in the US and Canada and the UK that are nuclear specialists and do EIAs and that. So they've offered us some background information on that, so we did use that information. The 2024 study, I don't know, did we mention that, or is that one that you're aware of?
No, you mentioned the 2022 study.
Yes, is there a 2024 one? I'd love, if you have a link to that, I'd love you to send it through, please. That would be marvelous, because we were only aware of the one that we used. In terms of impact on this project, there will be a detailed economic study in the next phase. It's not in this phase. It was incorporated into the socio-economic report, very high level, but it has been identified as a detailed study that needs to stand on its own in the next phase, together with the tourism impact assessment and a separate social impact assessment. And that study will have a full cost benefits analysis in it. So we will have able to have a look at that.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to move to these two ladies here, and then I'm going to get back to you.
Evening. I'm wearing two hats today. One is as a Herman and the other one from Canada Cheese. And in the reports, the two scoping documents that I've read on noise and visuals, the Clubback one, there's no mention at all of the power lines. So are they excluded from the EIA? What is going on? Because they're not, the whole scoping document is just literally the doors. So can we have some clarity on that? And then another question. in those two reports, it says at the bottom, a fatal flaw. Okay? And in adding up how many are yes, how many no's, do you count like that? Or how do you get that Bantam chip gets up or placement down, whatever? Just, is there a weighting on environmental, human impact, social, economic, whatever? And where are you going to get the water from before you build this desalination plant? Yes. We're a very water scarce area.
Thank you.
I can remember all of it. Okay, power lines are excluded from our scope. The simple answer is that the power lines are there's a different applicant. So the applicant for the power station is the Eskom Generation, or Eskom Holding Stock Limited, and the power lines, the applicant is if they've changed their name, the National Transmission Company of South Africa, which used to be Eskom Transmission, but is no longer. They're now standalone company. So it is a separate applicant, and they will have to do their own study.
But can I ask you, so you've got 50% here and that one, and you put them together from an environmental point of view, and you've got quite a big, so they can't be big independently. They have to go, because our pylons are more along compared to the newer ones.
So, and that's, we do discuss them. That is one of the reasons why Bantam Smith we're recommending that it be scoped out at this stage, because there is not enough information about the power lines at this stage and where they would want to run them, A, or B, where to. We don't have that information. The national, the NTCSA don't have the information at this time. So that is one of the reasons why we have listed Bantam Smith to be scoped out at this stage. Yes, we do mention some of the connection points, but there is definitely more information on the Tasman side. Bantam Smith is like a little bit of a hole in terms of information. So yeah.
And then how do you weight?
Okay, so the impacts aren't weighted. So if you have a look in our document, I think it is in chapter 2 and also repeated in chapter 11. There is our impact assessment, impact significance methodology, where it is very detailed, not the easiest methodology for the specialists, I have to say, but it is a very fair methodology. They have to say, in terms of their particular aspect, what does low mean, what does medium mean, what does very low mean, what does high mean, what does fatal flaw mean. And then they do the numbers from there. Well, there's no numbers. They have to do their little grid thing and come up with that themselves, but they actually provide that definition. And that will be revisited and updated as they move into their detailed phase. But the different aspects are not weighted. They are all evenly assessed and evenly taken into. So tourism is not more important than biodiversity, and biodiversity is not more important than tourism.
Thank you. I see you. I see that lady first with the black and white, and then I'm going to get to you. Thank you. And then I'll get to you.
I'm Helen Moss, and I'm a biologist.
Just speak closer to the mic, please.
I have a question on your EIA process. I've looked at that timeline that you give, and it's speeded up to the point where I don't think a lot of that information can be as significant as it needs to be. Biological processes don't start and end the day that the specialist visits the site. They take place over a number of cycles, over seasons, over years, sometimes over fire cycles, over normal cycles. So how is that accounted for in your EIAs, which are so extremely short-lived? That's my first comment, my first question. My second one is that Eskom, I'm afraid, there's nothing personal here, but have proven themselves to be both incompetent and corrupt. On numerous occasions and over many years. How are you going to convince me, Eskom, that things are going to be different now, and that you're capable of actually getting the nuclear plant not only built, but actually run properly and sensibly? I have serious doubts about that. And then my third thing is what was negative about the power lines. I think it's very dishonest to fragment the different processes involved in the building and operation of this power station. The power lines are a huge part of it, and they need to be seen as an integral component of the power station, to be honest and fair to everybody.
Okay, so biodiversity cycles, yes, they are absolutely agree. They happen over many years. Okay, we have done our best to make sure that we've appointed specialists that know the areas, that know they've been here before, they know the habitats, and they've done many different EIAs in these areas over however many years. So we are not using specialists that graduated last month. They are specialists with many years' experience, so they all registered with the relevant professional, what do you call them? Yeah, they are signed or whatever they need to be. So they are well respected in their fields, and they are aware of how long things take to cycle through. So we definitely are using who we think are the best of the best at this point. So they do know what they're doing. And in the transmission lines, yes, we agreed that it is part of the project. Unfortunately, because of the applicant issue, we can't put them together. It is, though, acknowledged that it is a risk, and Eskom is aware of the risk. So if they do eventually decide where those power lines are going to go, and they do a separate EIA, we've been open in our document to say that it will be a separate EIA. We haven't hidden that from anybody. It's disclosed in there. And Eskom is aware of the risk that if those EIAs are rejected, well, then the plants fail. So they're aware of that risk, but I don't think we've hidden it from anybody. We've been open and honest about that it will be a separate process. I want to add.
And I have to be defensive. But yeah, so in terms of the transmission lines, as soon as we are clear on which site is chosen, we've already, we have to also follow the same process that IPPs have to with what used to be Eskom transmission, which is now a separate subsidiary, and we have to comply with their rules just like every IPP does. So there's a process you have to follow in terms of applying, getting a quotation from them, asking them where the power lines would go, etc. So we've done that, and we're busy with that process. And as soon as we can hit the button, we'll ask them to start the environmental impact assessment. It may be a little bit behind, but the authorities are likely to put a condition that you've got to consider cumulative impacts and you need to have this approval. So that's what we expect to happen from past experience. And so then on the defensive side, so I know I look very young, but I have been with Eskom for 42 years. And look how young I look. Yes, we have had some good times, and we've had some really bad times, and there have been leaders that we have not been proud of. But we have turned load shedding around, and I can personally say, and I'm saying it from my own personal perspective, things are much, much better, and leadership has absolutely turned around the performance in the company, and working on all the issues that they need to work on. The proof is in the pudding, and we aren't load shedding at the moment, and
Solar's taken over.
Yeah, so I only speak the truth, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't want to say it from my heart. And that's my view, that's my personal view, and I'm sharing it with you. I think that the company has turned things around.
Thank you. Thank you. I see you, sir. Thank you for your patience.
I'm Ina Jabala. I'm with the Southern Overberg Botanical Society. I have two questions. Who selects the specialist assessments, especially as far as botany is concerned, botanical impact on our floristic region, also on the geology and the hydrology of this very, very sensitive area. I don't know how many people know that since the last study was done, that we have now got another Ramsar wetland site here in the Overberg, which is a couple of kilometers from here. The reason why I bring this up is to add to Ms. Moss's comment that the natural world changes. To go and do a desktop study of assessments that were done 10 years ago will not be sufficient to give a proper impact study for our region. Things have changed. To add to the gentleman who spoke about tourism, the impact on tourism, anybody who drives through Hermanus during peak holiday season will see that that has also changed tremendously. All the development that has taken place in the last couple of years. So that's my first question. How do you bring your information up to date and not just do a desktop study with specialists that you appoint, which you cherry pick? Then the second question is the IRP 2025 plans for 5,200 megawatts of new nuclear power to be added by 2030. You are on the clock. Won't you make mistakes by forcing the process so that you can get those nuclear power plants online and built? That's usually how mistakes are made. How are you going to ameliorate the risks?
So in answer to the first question about the specialists, so when we put our proposal together and we bid for the project, we pick the project, we pick the specialists. We pick the specialists that we have a good working relationship with. We pick specialists that we know have worked in the area. We pick specialists that we know what their qualifications and background are, and that we have worked well together with them before, and that we feel are trustworthy to do a good job. We pick the best that we know of for the project at hand. So if it's a project down here, we'll pick someone who's good with this type of vegetation and has worked in this vegetation. We won't pick a specialist that works in the Limpopo, for example, or specializes in vegetation in the Limpopo. So we try and pick specialists that are specific to the area that we're going to be working. It goes without saying. In this particular case, we have some of the specialists, like for example, geohydrology, wetlands, etc., are the same specialists that worked on the Nuclear One project. They have already been to site many, many times. They've been working on these sites for 10 years or more. I know for a fact that every single specialist, none of the specialist studies that are in that report especially with regards to biodiversity and wetlands, etc., are desktop studies. All of those specialists went to site to check if there have been any changes from their previous site visits to now. Where they are new specialists, they have been in contact with old. Unfortunately, the one specialist that we would have wanted to have used, I think it was for flora, he's passed away, so we didn't have the option to appoint him again. So we picked the best that we know of for the area, and he's used those previous studies, yes, but he has been to site to see if anything has changed subsequently to that, and he knows the area very well. So we do stand with our specialists, we work well as a team, and so yes, we do pick the specialists, but I do believe we have a very strong team on our side, and they're all independent, well qualified, and suitably registered. We also have just
follow up.
Yeah.
Is there a list of those specialists available?
Yes, there's a full list of the specialists in the report. It's in chapter 2. The specialists, their company, their degrees, their registrations. In the back, there's their declarations of independence, there's their CVs, there's their copies of their qualifications and their registration certificates. It's all there. I think it's Appendix E. And also, on top of that, every single specialist study has been peer reviewed in the EIA phase. Yeah, so I think I've covered all of those. On to Esther for the last one.
Yeah, so we have it as 2036 to 2039 in our IOP. Oh, is there something wrong on our slides?
It says 2030, and that's for
That starts construction.
Yes.
Oh, okay, but in the actual integrated resource plan, it is 2036 to 2039. So getting to construction takes some time, and there's a lot that needs to be done. But as we were saying, specifically related to the Tastepoint site, there's already a nuclear installation siting license application in, and that's being assessed, and that is years of studies. We have done a lot on the environmental side, and then it starts coming into the funding and financing and going out on tender for the construction of the plant. So there's a lot of preparation, upfront preparation that's been done for this process. And Dana Fontaine, which would be the first site, there's also a NISL, as we call it, a nuclear installation siting license application that we're busy with. The EIA is, the environmental authorization is issued, but it has been taken on court review, so we need to get through that process. And lots of preparation up front before you even start doing the first site. So 10 years before we start construction, or 8 years before we start construction is actually still quite a bit of time.
Pending approval. Sorry, can we make it the last one because we do have other proposals?
Just a follow-up question on my question around the urgency is informed by what happened at Kuiper. When the initial Kuiper power station was built, there was a huge need to boost South Africa's energy resources. And they started building Kuiper, but they also caused an enormous environmental problem by disturbing the dune belt around it, that it has taken millions, hundreds of millions of rand to restore. If you rush this part of the process, there will be a repeat of that environmental negative.
Okay, so I mean, Kuiper site we know really, really well, and that site was studied in the previous EIA over 10 years, and also with specialists going back to site, answering questions, and addressing all of the risks that were raised. And when we start going into construction, you know, the environment has an impact on the plant has an impact on the environment, so we really have to be conscious of that from all aspects. And a nuclear plant you don't rush into it. And I really don't think that Eskom has rushed into it. We've done a lot of baseline work to make sure that the geotechnical work, the geological work, the geohydrological work that has been done over years and years. It's not just a few months of looking at it and saying it's okay. And the seismic, of course.
Thank you, Peter. Right. A gentleman that's been patient there at the back for so long. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anton Kruger. I was also at the meeting last night, so I've got a few follow-up questions. The one thing, it's more of a comment, is more...
Could you speak up, please?
It's more a South African problem. How independent can you really be if you get paid by the people building the nuclear power plant? The other thing that I raised last night as well is you guys are now reassuring everyone that you will be advising DFFE to rather build this power plant at Klip. So there's a lot of people so there's a lot of people that didn't even come to this meeting. I saw people turn around at the door. But it's really not your decision. The decision lies with DFFE. So can I please suggest that you first go to DFFE and clear this matter up with them, and either get him to say, okay, you have to do it here, or you have to do it at Klip, or you have to do it both sides, and then let us react to that, so that everyone can be involved as they should be. Because at the moment there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people have already turned around and is not chosen not to be involved. My second point is that this presentation spent about a minute on what's actually going to be built at the site. And there is a lot of uncertainty. I think few people know there will be a small town there. There will be 380 houses there. In the water, there will be construction. There will be wet concrete cast there. There will be a desalination plant that will have brine that will be needed to be dealt with. There will be a siltation plant. The silt needs to be dealt with. The sewage from the new town will need to be dealt with. And then, of course, the nuclear waste will need to be dealt with. And at the moment, even Kubert's nuclear waste is not dealt with properly. 3 times as much is stored there than that should be stored. So yeah, there's. I do feel that you need to really inform us what is going to happen there. And that is also this is like a blanket EIA. We do not know what is going to be built there, so we cannot comment on it properly. My last comment is I'm concerned in you taking you splitting up the whole process and just doing an EIA on a small piece. For instance, say the transmission cables or just the power plant. You need to look at this thing holistically to really determine what the environmental impact is. You cannot break it up like you are attempting to do now. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Okay, so the first one was independence. How independent can we be if we be paid? So Eskom pay us, yes, they do. We invoice them for the work that we do. However, what does happen is they pay us regardless of the end decision. Our final invoice is issued on the submission of the final report, regardless of what the DFFE decide. So it is their risk, depending on, and if the end result is a rejection, then we still get paid. Our payment is not right at the end and determined by the end result. So that is the one thing that I can offer there. In terms of the decision, the recommendation, there's a process that needs to be run. So we've done a good 6 months worth of studies in order to prepare and draft this draft report, which we are obliged to put out and required in terms of legislation to put out for public review, which is what we have done now. Yes, we have put out in the recommendation that Tasford goes forward to the EIA, and yes, we have requested comments on that. We have to then take all your comments, put it into the final report submitted to the DFFE. They then take that report and look at all your comments, and then they decide whether they are happy with that recommendation going forward. Once they get the approval of the plan, of the scoping report and plan of study, if they do, we then will let you all know what that decision will be. We would say this is what the department has said, and this is what will be going through into the EIA phase. So we are obliged to then inform you, but we do have to let the process run as it is required to and legislated to. So that is our recommendation at this point. We will then submit that with all your comments to the DFFE in the final report, and then they have 42 days to get back to us with their decision about whether we just do placement next phase or whether we have to do both.
But everyone will be informed.
Everybody will be informed. Okay. And then what is going to be built on site? Yeah. We can't put the whole chapter 4 into the presentation. It's many, many pages. But you can go and have a look at chapter 4 of the scoping report. Please do. It's a full project description. It details all the infrastructure that would be built on the site. It just details the parameter envelope. It details the worst case scenario, what would be on site, all the maximum parameters that we're looking at. So yeah, do yourself a favor and have a look at chapter 4. Unfortunately, there's just too much information there for us to put into a presentation. We would still be doing the presentation if we had put that much detail in. So we have to give you a summary and point you in a direction if you want more information. So yeah, I think that's. I think we have covered that already, but we do take note of the concern.
Thank you. So I just want to see how many questions we still have. It's 10 to 8. I know this gentleman had his hand up, and I know that gentleman had his hand up, and I just see in total. How many questions are left?
Really high so you can see.
Do you help me, please? And then I just want to ask that if you have the same question, please don't repeat questions that have been asked already, so that we can get to everyone. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
I've heard replies from Eskom, and Sadiq in his presentation showed very clearly, and I think the chapter 4 showed very clearly, the key component of a nuclear plant is a distribution line as well. So you cannot, if your scope, your brief is to exclude it, it is a fatal flaw which you need to include in your final report. You have recommended that if it's a Tasman site that it goes for, that it includes a distribution line. Okay, and the fact that it's not defined, you can take a plant parameter envelope approach on the distribution line as well. But it is a fatal flaw not to include, because purely from a footprint point of view, it far exceeds the footprint of the plant here. And it is going to have a major impact on heritage, on environment, and the rest of the kingdom. And so it needs to be included in your recommendation that since it was excluded and the decision is against the going to place point, it needs to be redone, and that needs to be included even if it is a plant parameter envelope that's considered. But you cannot exclude it from the EIA because it's excluded. The other thing, having heard the Eskom comments, realistically speaking, the constraints on the performance of Eskom with construction of the other plants was not their ability, or even the project management. It was really and I forget the name of the act, that forces SOEs to follow a very specific procurement approach. And where it's not about the capability and the expertise that gets the contract awarded. And we cannot afford, in a plant like this nature, to go through the same errors. So I would feel that that is an impact assessment or specialist that needs to be included in this, in terms of decision making. Is it on what the impact is going to have if those constraints are going to be imposed on whoever the contractor is.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I think they are noted. Can I just confirm that, Natasha, that you've noted these concerns? Thank you. Sidika, do you want to respond?
Just correctly from what was noted. You're referring to distribution line, I think you mean transmission. The transmission line and all that. And are you referring to the Public Finance Management Act provision that we need to look at? So, it's just to be familiar. That's legislation that governs the spending of resources.
Thank you. Thank you for providing that clarity and thank you for your comment. Sorry. So I'm going to give people who haven't had a chance to comment an opportunity. And please try not to repeat what has been said. Thank you. It's hard.
My name is Juan. I'm also an engineer. Now, Australia just did the same exercise. They also wanted to put up a nuclear power plant. And so there was quite a lot of arguments in the government about the nuclear power station because they're really conscientious about nature and things like that. So then they contacted Elon Musk and they got a quotation from him and he put up solar there for a tenth of the price that the nuclear power station cost. And Australia is extremely happy with the job Elon Musk did there with the nuclear power station. There's no...
You mean the solar power?
The solar power, right. So they completely did away with the nuclear, and they went solar, and he did it at a tenth of the price. Now I want to know, how did you come about the story that we must go nuclear? Did you do the same studies as Australia, or did we just thumb sucker here because we wanted to do the government decided?
Thank you for your question. I think it's been responded to, it's been asked earlier, but I think you might not have been here. Just respond briefly. What is it off? No, it's
all the way up. All the way up.
All the way up.
Yeah, so I haven't seen that information on Australia. They have always been very, very anti-nuclear and they don't have any nuclear, so they've got a very specific position on nuclear. South Africa has a different position. We have a nuclear power station. We have successfully run a nuclear power station, and it is part of our low carbon option to ensure the security of supply. So renewables on their own doesn't do it for us. Combination of renewables base load does it for us. And Australia, haven't looked at their energy mix recently, but they've also got a lot of gas, which we don't yet. We don't have. So they've got a bit of base load on gas. They've got coal and they've got renewables. Yeah.
Sorry, they've got coal, but they don't have gas. And they specifically because of the environmental effect of coal, they looked at nuclear and they looked at solar. And the solar was much cheaper than the nuclear. And now, I mean, Australia put a lot of money into investigation. It's more than 10 years, and I know in the government there was people kicked out because of this fact. And then eventually Elon Musk came in there and put this solar system up there for them for a tenth of the price of the nuclear power station. And you know, the time when they had recently some storm or something there, and the coal power station went offline, and it's 0.05 of a second, and the nuclear, the solar power kicked in, and Australia didn't have a ditch.
Thank you, sir.
How amazing was that?
Thank you for that information. I've got to move on. I'm thinking of which one is
Thank you, William Stafford. I'm a researcher and obviously interested in the affected party. So I have two questions. One is that you claim the CI process is technology agnostic. So how can that be the case? I mean, really, we have to specify the type of nuclear technology to actually come up with a reasonable assessment of environmental impacts and risks. The technology, some are really experimental, using different fuel sources, having different emissions and impacts, having different issues with wastes. We can't just have a technology agnostic basket and do an environmental impact assessment. Some are modular, different fuel sources, etc. So I really object to that aspect. You need to be specific. It'll be the same as saying to me, okay, I'm going to travel to Cape Town, and no matter what car I drive in, one in the parking lot, and the experimental one somebody's putting together in the location, it'll all be the same. It'll fulfill the requirements, in other words, the availability factor or the demand in terms of energy, but in terms of environmental impacts, it's clearly going to be very different. So I think in terms of technology agnostic, I don't think that should be. It needs to be specified. The second point you alluded to was that when you do the technology assessment, you obviously want to do an energy assessment because you're thinking in the back of your mind, well, what other options are there? Is there something lower impacts, lower risk, etc.? I don't think that's been done. The previous comments being made was, yes, we do need a mix of these things in our system, but the big question is always where. So of course we do have wind and solar resources. We have things like pumped storage. We have things like battery storage. Where's the comparable study looking in this region, in this area, saying let's compare wind and solar with some storage compared to nuclear, and let's see if they can supply the energy that we need. And don't discount some renewable energy options because they don't provide base load. Base load is a bit of a misnomer. When you have widely distributed energy sources and a mix of energy storage, you don't need base load.
Thank you for those comments. They are well noted. I'm going to move to that lady. Did you want to respond?
Sadika should respond on the agnostic.
The agnostic technology.
Maybe just probably didn't come through clearly in the presentation around we said it's technology neutral. But we are guided by what is in the nuclear energy policy, which clearly states it would be a pressurized water reactor design. And that does limit the large reactor components around that specific technology and thing. So all the vendors that's providing PWRs needs to meet those plant parameters to meet that. So suppliers like the CANDU reactors, the RPMK would not be able to meet that because that's against the policy imperatives that's currently in the nuclear energy policy of 2008, which is what we are following. So in terms of the plant parameter envelope, there is what is used internationally around that, and it does limit your deployment to those specific reactors that meets the requirements that's specified in the plant parameter envelope. So we do know for the large nuclear reactors, it would be a pressurized water reactor design, not a boiling water reactor design, not the RPMK, and not the CANDU reactor as an example of that. So that's already an eliminator from a policy imperative position that guides us in terms of what you see in that plant parameter envelope. So we've taken all the different designs that we are aware of, looked at those and came up with what we believe is a suitable plant parameter envelope that meets our regulatory requirements, that meets our requirements from an Eskom perspective, and the vendor needs to prove that it meets those requirements specifically for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know you have a burning question. I just want to check. I don't want to take away an opportunity from you to ask questions, but it is 8 o'clock. Is it okay for you to carry on for 10 more minutes? Because we did say the meeting time until 8 o'clock. And from a safety perspective, the team does need to drive a bit. So can I kindly request that we carry on for 10 more minutes and wrap it up then? Thank you.
There's the lady in the red and this lady in the blue haven't asked a question.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then this side?
And then that lady in the green and who hasn't asked.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
I've got more of the statements than really questions. When you speak about nuclear power plant in an area like this, nothing that you said tonight is really that new because Bantamklip and Taste Point has been under the radar for many, many, many years. So it's more common to Eskom that you are expecting, and I have much appreciation for the EIA process. I mean, so I understand how it works. But with something this complicated, complex and sensitive, and I'd say even emotionally loaded, because if you ask any conservationist and marine biologist, they'll say that it would be a fatal flaw to develop something like Bantamklip. Nothing keeps Eskom to EIA timeframes before you've actually started an application. Nothing is keeping Eskom from sharing the information prior to actually even submitting an EIA application. So I'm just wanting to say that if you are transparent, I think people should be afforded much longer to actually look at all these complex sets of information, which now they will be required to do in a very short space of time, and many people, being lay people, not understanding a lot of what they're going to read. So I also gathered from everything I read on the information available on the web that even Bantamklip is not ready at the moment. It's definitely not off the table. So by when would you like to, because then we're going to have this process again, but by when would you like to consider Bantamklip ready? And maybe if Ashley could speak on the fatal flaws and how you determine those for the people that don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you need to comment on the pre-app process. That was fine.
So the pre-application process is there's a lot of questions about it. We did do some pre-application meetings last year. The DFFE, we did actually ask the DFFE about it, and they're not entirely happy with that way of working, because for them then the comments are not inside the process. They only consider process from when you submit the application. So they take those comments sort of maybe more seriously, but yes, you can put it out ahead of time, but there is a risk, obviously, to the process that they won't necessarily. It potentially can cause issues in the process itself. So there is a little bit of a grey area in that area. So that's why we typically don't do it to put it out beforehand. In terms of fatal flaws, the current report doesn't have any fatal flaws identified. The specialists have looked at so typically what happens in a scoping report, and I know that ours is a little bit larger than normal, they would look at what the potential impact would be. They do like a screening of the impacts, and they look at what potential impacts might occur. But they, in some scoping reports, they don't even put a significance to them. They just list the impacts. So what we've done is maybe a step extra in that we've asked the specialists to actually look at potential impacts with significance plus potential mitigations, and what the significance would be post-mitigation.
It's actually required by the regs, even though a lot of scoping reports don't include the detail. There are some impacts that are very high before mitigation, but all of them have dropped after mitigation. So post-mitigation, good implementation of a management plan would essentially eliminate any vapor flaws. And that's from all the specialists, both marine, fauna, flora, biodiversity, etc. So that's just on that. And maybe on the bottom slip, readiness. It may not necessarily be known long.
There's still a lot of studies that needs to be conducted for long-term scope for us. From our side, we need to do the seismic hazard analysis work on the site. There's a lot of geotechnical work that goes into those studies, and that would be the order of years for us to complete that. If we need to reprioritize those activities, it would take us at least 5 years to get to another state of readiness. Just from the studies perspective that we need to do to confirm the seismic suitability of the site. On that. So that's one of the longer-term studies that we still need to conclude on the site, and that we have not yet started, that we need to do. Over and above that is all the other ancillary infrastructure assessments that we need to complete for the bridges, the roads, and all the other activities to support the transfer of the heavy components to the site, to complete those and understand what that work would be to include that. And then there's also understanding, and I think it's going to come out of the socioeconomic impact assessments, the upgrades that needs to happen in the surrounding towns and areas, and the planning with the municipalities around, somebody mentioned the sewage facilities, hospitals, daycares, school. All of that needs to be really looked at and reconsidered and timed in terms of how that would work. And we would need to work with provincial and local municipalities to put those plans in place for the areas. So there's a lot of work that we still need to do to initiate on that and to reprioritize our activities for that. Thanks.
Thank you. There's the lady in the blue, and then the lady in the green. The last one is something. Are you gonna?
Hello, I'm also I'm here at the beach, and I just want to touch a little bit on the timelines as well, and on your comment in the beginning about 2030 starting to build the construction and then completed by 2039. You mentioned that there's a possible second plant at Dynfontein as well, and maybe then only after that it will be Tuispunt and Bambongsklip. But do you have kind of like a summarized timeframe to say the second plant should be built or starting to build, say 2035, and the third one by 2040? Surely Eskom must have some timeline in their minds to be able to supply the power that's needed. If you can just give us that short timeline. Thank you.
I'll answer that answer. So the RFP says clearly that we need to stop. Sorry. So the RFP is quite clear that we need to deploy 5,200 megawatts of new nuclear power by the year 2039. As the backstop, that's of 5,200 reactors. From our current planning, that translates into roughly 4 reactors that needs to be constructed. You cannot build that on one site in sequential manner. So we would need to construct them in tranches of 2, and they would normally be 2 years apart. So if we start 2029, 2030 for the first 2 units at Kubur, the other 2 would need to be deployed out of placement of Bambongsklip and normally 18 months apart from when we start with the construction. So that would put us here around 2031, 2032 to start on this side or placement with the construction to meet the timeline for 2039, and taking into account learning as well. Included in that would also be SMRs in terms of small modular reactors to be deployed at the site still to be determined, and that we need to take through the different cycle studies. Separately, that's looking at that to meet that objective. So that's the timelines that we need to work at to be successful in deploying the IRP objectives of 5,200 megawatts by the year 2039.
the yachts.
Thank you. At long last, thank you for your patience. Hi, my name is Heather. I'm a local landowner. I have a question specifically for Eskom. I don't think WSP will be able to answer this. They're very clear that they're not involved in this process regarding the transmission lines. So for Eskom, you have said that the transmission lines process is already running. Maybe you can provide a little bit more information as to where that process is at. What are the timelines around that process? How do we get involved in that process as well to be registered as IAPs in that process too? And I know in the webinar last year there was some vague feedback as to watch the media for more. I'm not sure that's going to happen here. I think we need something a little bit more detailed as to how we can get involved in that process as well as following the process for the nuclear power station itself. A final question. You will be giving the scoping reports to the Competence Authority in May with all the comments included. Does that document with all the comments also come back to the IAPs? Thank you.
Thanks. So the environmental impact assessment for the transmission lines has not started yet. What we've started is engaging them to find out where would the lines more or less go from what substation to get to here or to test point. And then there's a process to get quotations, and then we need to say to them and give them a down payment and say, right, we want you to start the process, and then they will start the environmental impact assessment. So as soon as they start the environmental impact assessment, I'm sure that all the INAPs that are registered on this project will be notified. So we'll make sure that happens. But yeah, the EIA has not yet started. We expect that maybe to start in 6 months, maybe a year's time, once we've got a decision on this side.
So if by district, if it's selected, they won't do EIA for transmission lines from here, they'll only then focus on placement, or will they still do it irrespective in the chance that they might one day use it?
No, they'll only do for placement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our last question from Anton.
There was just a second question there on the final report.
That one was.
Yeah. So there was a final. Yeah. So just to answer your question in terms of the final report, yeah, we're going to be under the hammer as such between the 5th of May and I think we need to submit by the 18th. So we will be working very hard from now until then to get all the comments in and responded to, etc., etc. All the comments will be responded to in the comment and response report, which is part of the public participation report, which is Appendix B of the report. When we submit that report to the DFP, we submit it to them on the 18th. We then will upload all those. We take down the draft report and we replace it with the final report, and we send out probably the next day. We would send an email out to the database saying, please note the final report has been submitted on this date to the DFE and it's available on the websites for review. So it would be there for review. You would be, because we're still early in the process, you would be welcome to submit written comments on the final, because we would then take those and put them into the draft. So there's many options and opportunities still ahead to comment, and even if the DFE do approve our recommendation to only look at placement, you won't be, the Bantamska people will not just be deleted from the database. You will be kept informed, you will be kept involved, you will get the emails, you would be sent the links to the websites, you would still be able to read the EIA and still provide comment in the next phase. Okay.
Thank you. Last comment from Anton.
Yes, I know you stopped recording quite a while ago. Does it mean the last questions on the recording?
No. This is part of the official EIA process recording. I stated earlier that the media video recording was independent from this EIA process.
Okay, thank you. Then also, I just feel you've got 750 pages there. I feel 30 days or 28 days or whatever is not enough I don't think anybody is going to, a handful of people will actually read 750 pages. But time allowed is just way too short. And then finally, I don't accept your explanation that you cannot do a presentation of what's actually going to happen there. I'm sure I can do a pretty good presentation in 10 minutes, even 5 minutes. You usually want the main point there. So I feel you guys should do that maybe tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. I hear your comments, I hear your concerns. I think from a process perspective, we want to highlight to everyone, yes, it's a bulky, voluminous draft scoping report. This is a project with history, with lots of information that have come over the past 10 years, with information that's been updated with recent information. That is why we have a non-technical summary that is specifically for people who do not have a lot of time on hand to read all the documents. The draft scoping report, in essence, concatenates all the specialist studies, the voluminous specialist studies, in a way that is more understandable. So if you have a specific, we recommend that if you have a specific interest in a certain specialist study that will be undertaken, go to that appendice, go through the draft scoping report, and then the non-technical summary is also available in audio in all 3 languages that we've mentioned. I don't know if you want to comment on the last comment that he made about the presentation points.
Yeah, I don't know how I would put all of it in, but we will definitely have, we also try and keep this present, there's so much information to put into a presentation, and as you say, the report is lengthy and there's a lot of information in it. So it really is just to provide a summary, and we try and keep the presentations to like 20 minutes, maximum half an hour, so that's a very little time to put a lot of information in. And we don't want to spend the first hour and a half of the meeting doing the presentation, because people will lose interest. And
we'd like to hear your input.
And we want to give more time for comments and response. So we will obviously have more detailed presentations in the next phase, depending on where we'll be. So yeah, stay tuned for more. But yeah, I would recommend you go and read the draft scoping.
Thank you very much. I'm going to close the meeting. Is it a very short comment? The utmost last.
Very quick. I'm quite appalled to discover that we're following energy policy made by the government in 1998 and 2008. There's been a sea change in the energy landscape since then. Why are we still following that policy when some of it's 20 years old? I find that outrageous and nonsense.
Okay, we'll look for an answer and give you an answer in the comments and response report in terms of why that hasn't been renewed. But the electricity planning process, which is the integrated resource plan, is by the electricity planning, and that was published last year in 2025. So, part of the energy policy is one aspect, but the electricity policy is one level down, and that is pretty up to date. So yeah, but I'm not sure why South Africa hasn't updated the energy policy.
Thank you very much. And so I am going to just say a last word of thanks. Appreciate your time, appreciate your participation, appreciate your patience. Please travel safely. Keep an eye out for our correspondence. And this is not the last opportunity for comment. We do have a meeting tomorrow evening in Gansbaai. And there will be also 2 more online meetings that we will share the dates with you a little bit later this month. Thank you so much.